Where leaders go, learning follows. Harvard Business School Executive Education offers more than 60 in-person and virtual programs. Learn more and apply at hbs.me/go. That's hbs.me/go.
Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Maricella Herrera and Megan Oliver.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Maricella Herrera, and I'm here with the wonderful Megan Oliver. How are you, Megan?
Doing well. I am back in New York for the time being.
You're in New York, and I am not. I am in London, suffering from 3 broken toes.
I know.
So
and you were so gung-ho about your marathon plans and your everything, your new trainer.
Yeah, I mean, I had my running coach. I was going to do the New York City half again. I was all in with my running plan. You know, I was in El Salvador a few weeks ago. Even there, I was figuring out how to exercise and how to do things. Came to London to see my nephew and my brother and my sister-in-law. And because I was still so in like the running mode, I was, exercising. Went for my runs. I planned everything. And then I went to the gym because you have to do some strength training to make yourself less vulnerable to injuries. So ironically, I went to do that so I wouldn't get injured. And I got injured. I dropped a 15-kilo weight on my foot. And now I'm having a hard time. I was in a lot of pain. And I won't be running for at least 6 to 8 weeks.
Oof, I cannot imagine. And speaking of gyms, can I just say, I'm back at my gym in New York, obviously. I use Crunch Fitness. Woohoo! And I'm so mad because it's January. So everybody around me, I guess, is on their gym fitness kicks for the new year. But all of a sudden, it's so hard to get into any classes because they keep filling up. And it wasn't this hard, when I was working out there, midway through the year last year. And so I'm like, I'm glad that everyone is getting healthy and like working out with me. But I'm like, I can't get into any of my favorite classes anymore.
Look, we're almost at the end of January. It's not going to last that long.
Exactly. No, it'll peter out. If it's anything like all of the other gyms that I've petered out with, it'll peter out in like February and March.
Yeah, but hopefully not. I mean, it would be a great thing for people to get healthy. I'm currently, I went to the doctor today to check on my foot, and currently trying to figure out how I'm gonna exercise and not fully fall out of my routine while I'm in recovery for my foot, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know about you, but to me, and I think I've said this before here, running is really for my mental health. It's really, better for me and for everyone around me that I run. It's how I reduce my stress level, is the time I use as my me time. And not being able to do that for, long period of time is going to be a hard thing. And it's something I have to look out for. And I think we all have to look out for knowing what are our triggers, what are the things that we rely on for our mental health, and making sure that we're paying attention to it.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the classes are for me. I think that's why I'm so, for the first almost 29 years of my life, I am 29 now. I would have been so stoked to have an excuse not to go.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I've found that they really are something I can rely on. So yesterday, thank goodness, at the end of the day, I managed to get into it was core yoga, which was harder than I was looking for, since I wasn't as good about keeping up the schedule back in Texas. But I was like, it's something, and it's something that I can do. And today, I think I'm just out of luck, but I'm gonna desperately try for Zumba tomorrow or something.
I was gonna say, look for something during the day. That's the beauty of flex work, right?
Yes, exactly. I was supposed to do a yoga during the day yesterday, but I mixed up the times and I realized it was during our come check us out community circle for the LGBTQ community. And so I could not go.
Which I
But
heard was fantastic.
it was so fun. If you were there, hi. I love talking to you. We had that. It was one of our allies were welcome events. We do those every other month, and we all just really talked a lot about being queer in the workplace, as well as we had one ally there, and she just asked a question, a very genuine question about just wanting to be a better ally, but not wanting it to seem performative or like she was in our faces or anything. And it was just such a question, just so born from like a genuine want to help and a genuine want to be there. But to not make it about her, which was so appreciated. And every single one of us just like gave us her answer. And it was a really, really good space.
I love to hear that. For anyone who's not familiar with our community circles, these are spaces where you can show up and be fully yourself. It's for you to come and have a space to share with those who share an identity to you. So we have community circles for Black Women Plus, for Latinx professionals, for the LGBTQ plus community, for Asian Pacific Islanders, working caregivers, remote professionals, and professionals over 40. So we know that our experiences are very complex. And sometimes you just need to be with people who get it. And that's what we're there for. So join Megan at the community circle for the LGBTQ plus community and some of our other amazing peeps at the other ones. We do them once a month.
Yeah. Come join us.
Cool. Well, I'm going to quickly go to my conversation today with Jill McGinley. Jill McGinley is the Vice President of Workplace and CX Marketing Adoption Operations for Lincoln Financial Group. She's fantastic. We had a really great conversation about her career and trajectory and just a lot of how the workplace has changed. Lincoln Financial Group has been one of our partners for years now, and we're great fans of them. They've been huge supporters of Ellevate and of the Mobilize Women Summit. So it's really great to be able to talk to Jill and some of their leaders in a different setting. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jill. So I am very happy today to be here with Jill McGinley from Lincoln Financial Group. Hi, Jill. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing well. It's sunny. So, Jill, I always like to start these kind of very broad and go from there. So the big old question is, can you give me a little bit of personal background and a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll admit sometimes I do enjoy talking about myself, so I'll take this opportunity to do that. No, I'm actually originally from Philadelphia, and I still live in Philadelphia. So I'm a born and bred Philadelphian, very proud of my city. And I'm married for 20 plus years, and I have 2 children. And actually, as of this August, both my kids are in college. So I am adjusting to being, I guess, what they traditionally called an empty nester. So it's been quite a journey adjusting to that. But my husband and I are always kidding with each other that it feels like it did when we were in college, right? We're back to that paradigm at home. So it's actually kind of been nice, and it's nice to see my kids grow and kind of go off on their own. So it's been an adjustment, but a good one. Just one other thing I always have to tell people is I am a true animal lover. And so my family would not be complete if I didn't mention my 2 bulldogs. I've got a French bulldog and an English bulldog. So my animals mean everything to me, and so they are certainly part of the family. But in addition to being, from Philadelphia, I've also had a really long career at Lincoln Financial Group, and I actually just celebrated my 20th year here. So it's been a momentous year for me overall, and a really exciting one.
It sounds like it. I mean, congratulations on all of it.
Thank
Kids
you.
going off to college, 20 years at a workplace, which we'll talk about because that is not something we see that often anymore. Um, and how I have a question about the bulldogs though.
Absolutely.
What are their names?
So the French bulldog is Dr. Pepper, and and the English bulldog is Captain Jack. So you can tell that my kids were both a fan of soda and a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean.
I love that so much. I love animals with food or beverage names. My cat is named Toffee.
There you go.
So,
There you go.
yeah. Okay, so now that you're kind of on your own, what has been the thing that's surprised you the most?
How much time I have has been the thing that surprised us the most. My kids were very active. They had their respective, areas that they liked to participate in. Lacrosse, swimming, dance, and so I don't think I ever appreciated how much time both myself and my husband spent driving them and being there to watch them. And so the time I've gotten back has actually been the biggest surprise. And so we've been kind of wading through what we want to do now. What activities do we want to take on? And it's actually kind of really, it's nice, it's refreshing, and we're taking our time to decide what that looks like. But that has truly been the biggest surprise.
It's probably like starting over in many ways, right? Like your timeline, your day-to-day life definitely changes.
Absolutely. It's a good way to put it, starting over. I like that.
So tell us a little bit about your work at Lincoln Financial Group. You're the VP of CX Marketing Operations. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So, like I said, 20 years here, and where I've ended up is in our workplace solutions marketing group, our marketing group, our customer experience strategy team. And I specifically, get the opportunity to lead the marketing operations. So creative services, project and program management, resource management, traffic planning, all of that fun stuff. And over 20 years, I've had a lot of opportunities at Lincoln. Folks will always say to me, how did you manage to stay in one place for so long? And I really think that part of that comes from the way Lincoln sort of views, its employees. They really do try to promote from within, and beyond promote from within, it has a lot more to do, I feel like, with giving opportunity. I've changed my career trajectory multiple times. I came to Lincoln as one of our retirement consultants, which meant I was in the field meeting with participants on a day-to-day basis, talking about retirement. And from there, I moved into relationship management, which meant I was engaging more with the plan sponsor. And then I took on some leadership roles sort of in those client-facing areas and got a really unique opportunity to help start a team within the marketing area that focused on communication strategy and custom communication for a lot of our larger clients. And so I pivoted and moved into a more marketing adjacent role a few years back, which honestly, that's what my degree's in. And I had always felt like that is what I truly wanted to pursue. But, opportunities present themselves and you have to take them. And this was just another opportunity, but it does speak to that idea, that I mentioned where, Lincoln is really open to that. And, employment that I've had in the past, I didn't always feel that way until I arrived here. And when I finally landed at Lincoln, it was really apparent that they were open. So for me, it doesn't feel really like I've been somewhere for 20 years. It feels like it's changed so often. The things I feel like I like the most are the things that I get to retain. And, the things that I want to evolve, I've had the opportunity to do that.
So it sounds like you've had a non-linear career path, but within the same company.
Exactly.
Which is a great testament, honestly, for Lincoln. I think that that's how you can get to really retain employees, is if you give them the chance to try different things, learn different things, and then prove what they really want to do.
And I always say to people, one of the things that I've always sort of clung to for my own sort of personal mantras is knowledge is power. And, I think when you're able to keep and continue to foster the knowledge you have of your organization and of your organization's clients, but then pair that with, new territory, right, within the organization, taking on new challenges. You keep a confidence level that I think is really important to growth, right? You always want to have that confidence, and I think the way to do that sometimes, in like you mentioned, that non-linear way, right? Maybe a less than traditional way, is within the same organization. You keep the knowledge, but you get to really try out different facets of the org and move within it. And so you get that sort of refreshed perspective as a professional without having to without having to give up everything that you sort of accumulated and built in terms of the knowledge of the org. So it's a unique position that I found myself in, but a good one that I highly recommend if you get that opportunity.
And I was going to ask, actually, as you're saying, you highly recommend this. You got the opportunity from Lincoln Financial, and did it happen like the opportunity came to you? Did you raise your hand? And what advice would you give to people who might be looking to make some sort of a lateral move or a different move within their own company?
Yeah, no, I can say it was a little bit of both. I've never been shy about taking anything on. I think most people that know me would say I'm always one of the first folks to raise my hand. And I think that continues to be true. I think it was true when I was a child, and it's certainly true later in life. And so I think part of it is that I'm always looking to do something different, right? And so I was always communicating that. And I think that's really important. That's not what everyone wants. And so you have to make sure people understand what it is that you are looking to accomplish, what you will be comfortable with. People will ask, but they don't always know to ask. And so it's really critical that you're open to that and that you're voicing yourself out there. You're putting your voice out there. On the flip side, I think Lincoln is very, very good at, understanding what it is that their employees, truly want. I mean, we do a lot of surveys at Lincoln. And the great thing about it is I'm in marketing, right? So I'm comfortable with surveys. We do a lot of surveys too. But you have to show that you're taking the information and that you're applying it. And, Lincoln has always been great about trying to understand what people want out of career pathing, what they want from a support model within the organization. And they take the feedback that they get from their employees and they apply it. And they apply that through making these kind of opportunities available. They do, I think, a really terrific job of communicating career opportunity internally, making sure people feel comfortable having the conversation. I can honestly say I think one of the worst things to do is to have a conversation with your manager and find out that, maybe you're not on the same page. And that has never, ever happened to me here. I feel like the dialogue is encouraged. It's a baseline expectation for a manager to be able to have that dialogue. And that dialogue has been I can't underscore how beneficial it's been to me in my career, but I see it perpetuating that same paradigm across the organization with the folks that are on my teams and other teams. And I think, going back, it's a little bit of both. And I think it always needs to be a little bit of both. You have to be vocal, but you also have to have, I think, that inherent appreciation by your employer that they want to go down that road of exposing you to new opportunities. So it's important to pick the right place, right? I think that's also incumbent upon us, is to make sure we've got the right match in where we're working.
That's so true. And I think we say it, but we don't really take it to heart as much as it should be taken to heart. You have to find a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And you have to find a good fit for the style of learning or of development that you want. And it's, you mentioned managers and the conversation and dialogue that happens with them. And that's massive. If we are not having those conversations ongoing, not just like maybe once a year, but just really ongoing, then we don't know what either our employees want or how we can support them. How have you taken it into your own hands, and how do you help or support those that are coming up the ranks within your organization or even outside, and help them with these kind of insights that you've learned through the time you've been there?
It's a great question. And, I think of being in a leadership position as being a privilege. There's not a plethora of leadership positions in the traditional sense. And so, the fact that I have been fortunate to have one and to spend a good amount of my career in one, I really do try to remind myself all the time that it's a privilege and you need to treat it that way.
Mhm.
And so, I think of it, I think of being a leader as um, being someone who is in charge of supporting my team, right? We set goals, we set strategy, and there needs to be commonality. And I think you have to build a coalition around success, right? And I think of that as what my job is, identifying what we're driving towards, helping the team to understand why, right? And then building their support for getting there. Telling someone what to do versus inspiring them to do it with you are two different things. And I had to learn that. I had to learn that the hard way sometimes. And, I've always kept that in mind. I think the other thing I always try to remember is I truly believe we manage the way we want to be managed. And so,
Mhm.
in that leadership perspective, I try really hard to think about that. I would never want to be micromanaged. And so I am deliberate in making sure that I don't do that so that folks have an opportunity to showcase all of their capability, right? All of their work. And I look at my role as I can be viewed and judged as an effective manager by the performance of my team as a whole and individually, rather than it being about me as an individual or a person. And I think shifting that perspective, because I don't think that was necessarily the perspective that I had at the start of my career. I
Right.
had to I had to grow up, frankly, and I had to learn that. And I think I've been successful at that, and therefore I've seen my team's success that way. And so that's the perspective I really try to employ all the time with folks. And we have open conversations about it. And I think that truly is what I communicate to them. It's about building your own coalition, right? Even if you don't have, what we consider to be a traditional management role, leadership is everywhere.
Yes.
And I think that's so important because I know for myself, had I not been able to exhibit my capability to do the next job, right, I would have never gotten it. It wasn't about getting into the next role. It was showing in the role I had all of that capability and being very open about my desire. But tying all of that together and building, your coalition, those folks around you that will help you to be successful, that's the message I really try to get out there.
You've said so many things. I was trying to write them down because I love the build a coalition around success. It's so true. It's a team sport, right?
Yeah.
You need to have everyone on board. Everyone needs to know clearly how they fit into the puzzle, where you're trying to go. And you, as a manager, need to build the supports for them to get there, as you said. Like, I think there's an aspect of changing your mentality for being an individual contributor to being a manager that is very hard and that we usually don't get prepared for. We're kind of just thrown into that. So I just want to say you sound extremely self-aware, and I don't think you said, you manage how you want to be managed. And I would say that's not necessarily true for most people. I think that's true for the people who, like you, are self-aware and can understand, like, oh, this is what I would like. Let me do the same for the other people. But I've seen a lot of the times people who just do as it's been done to them,
Yeah.
which doesn't necessarily make it the best experience for a lot of the people that work for them.
It doesn't. And I think, self-awareness, you mentioned self-awareness, and I think that that's so critical. And
Yeah.
it's not easy either. And
Mhm.
I think the performance sort of assessment part of a job, both your self-assessment, right, and even when you're assessing others, I think being self-aware, being open to the feedback, understanding maybe why people perceive you a certain way, or they perceive your decision making a certain way. I think it's always about the why for me. Anything can anything can land awkwardly, right? And, there's always an opportunity where maybe you're not communicating enough or you're over communicating, but understanding why people feel that way, to me, has been the thing that's been the most, I'll just say, eye-opening for me. Asking, right, and getting into the weeds and really trying to understand has really helped me. Then that self-awareness, also sometimes knowing your weaknesses as much as your strengths is so important. And I tend to be an introvert, right? So this dialogue that we're having one-on-one is far more comfortable for me than, say, being in a crowded room with, 15 or 20 people. I tend to feel far more comfortable engaging, with one or two individuals than a group of them. And so I've also had to realize sometimes that, I have to push myself beyond what I'm comfortable with. I may just want to talk one-on-one, but people may need more visibility from me to understand what's happening. And so it's picking up on those tiny nuances. I think that, number one, they definitely help you with be more successful. But I also think it demonstrates the idea that you have respect for others. And I would never, ever ask someone to do something I wouldn't do myself out of respect for them, because that's what I want back. And I don't think you can ask for something you're not willing to give. And so those are the kind of things that I try to keep front and center for myself, because, again, I go back to that idea of being in this role is a privilege, and I have to treat it like that.
I love that, the way that you look at it with the idea of privilege. I always, go back to the Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And leadership is everywhere, right? Like you said, we are all leaders wherever we're standing, if we want to stand up and lead by example, support other people, take a little bit more of that responsibility. So as a leader yourself, what are some of the questions you've asked when you have to make those really difficult decisions?
Oh, yeah, and there's a lot of them. So I'm sure at this point you've probably figured out I tend to think about things a lot. I love to analyze, right? And so I think it's
a woman after my own heart.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes you can't help what you are. You just have to embrace it. And I think a long time ago, I realized that I was always going to have a tendency to sort of analyze every situation. And so I try to use it to my advantage as much as I can. And so some of the questions that I tend to look at is, number one, like, am I missing any information before I make a decision? Mm-hmm. I think that it's important. I have a bias for action. And so I've had to train myself a little bit to put the part of the analysis first, right? And instead of the action first. And I think that tends to be a process that we all follow as we mature as professionals, right? And so I certainly am in that camp. I think the next thing I tend to think about is, what's the worst case scenario? And I know that sounds harsh, but I prefer to understand, what's the worst case scenario if I make this decision? And then what's the worst case scenario if I decide not to? Because I think being able to have that comparative in your mind and play that out, especially, when you're thinking of it through the lens of the job you're in, you have a good idea of what, kind of predictive behavior is coming. And so if I try to think through all of those things, what happens with the decision, what happens without it, I feel like I can get the scenarios down, and that helps me to kind of decide and weigh, what the right course of action is. And I think the last thing is probably, how do I, how does it impact, and how can I lessen any negative impact that might come with it? I think we tend to always focus on, the positives that will come out of a path we choose. And that's the right way, that optimistic perspective. But I think if you don't also weigh the impacts and think about who it impacts and how, you can find yourself with what you think is a great decision that isn't viewed that way. And so understanding and being cognizant of that and trying to get ahead of it with folks, I think is really, really important, especially the people it's going to impact that are doing the work day to day, right? I mean, they're they're living and breathing it. And so I know that I can make decisions that have pretty significant downstreams to individuals. And I want them to understand I considered them as part of that process.
Yeah, and that's so hard because, like you said, all these decisions will eventually impact people. And, right now we're going through a period of time where you're seeing all of these companies make all these decisions that immediately impact people, like layoffs, like reduction in force, like, changes and pivots in the way people work, whether it's remote or hybrid or whatever it is. How do you take the emotion out of it?
How do I take the emotion out of it? The best way that I know how to describe that process for myself is I always sort of make two columns, right, in my mind, or it literally sometimes just, on paper. I can be a little old school. I am a Gen Xer, so sometimes I just have to have that pen to paper. I think it's the visual that I like, but I will literally write down and sort of go through, what is the tangible benefit, that the data driven benefit that the organization is going to, to receive from making certain decisions, and then what are, those elements that will be, potentially impactful to the people, right? And separate it all out, right? And I really try very, very hard to process any of that emotional aspect of what is coming, so that ultimately, when I arrive at my decision, I've vetted it the right way in my mind. I think that's the most important thing, and that I've had a chance to sort of process the emotion. I think if you don't give yourself the chance to accommodate those emotional impacts for yourself, you are not going to be able to get to where you want in the process of coming to just whatever the decision is, right? I mean, it could be a staffing decision, it could be a change in responsibilities for folks, whatever it might be. I have to put myself in their shoes. I've got to process that. I've got to get to a place where, I believe at least that I feel like they're going to feel, so that I'm prepared to have those conversations and be able to feel, justified in the decision that I'm making. And that's not an easy process, but I do think it's an important one.
I agree. And I think that shows so much empathy. And it's, empathy, I believe, and from some of the research that I've been reading, is one of the most important leadership skills.
Yeah.
And it's not something that just happens. I mean, it is a skill that you develop.
No, and I for me, the empathy too goes back to that idea of managing the way you want to be managed. I mean, I would certainly hope that as folks around me are making decisions that have impacts to my team or to myself, that they're thinking through that they're at least acknowledging it as part of their process. And so I would never want to deliver anything less than that myself. And I think as long as you keep that, if it can be difficult sometimes, right? I mean, you're asked to make decisions quickly, frequently. Oftentimes, it can be an uphill battle to keep all of that in your vantage point, in your view, right? But I think the more you do it, the more it just becomes second nature. And then to your point, that second nature, I think, of doing that, that's where the empathy really starts to come from. It is part of who you are. And that I think is critical, because then you want to be authentic. And I hate to throw that word around, because I feel like it sometimes it gets lost, but what it really means to me is that you're just being yourself. And you're pulling yourself through, and being yourself and being empathetic doesn't mean that you don't make good business decisions, but it means that you're vetting those business decisions and you are considering the impacts. And even if you arrive at one that has an impact that you wish it didn't, you feel confident in what it is that you've decided. And you can explain that and you can stand on it. And I think that's what I always fall back to. Can I stand on this? Do I feel comfortable putting myself out there and say, yes, I did this. Yes, this was the decision. Here's the why. And the more I feel that is all vetted, and I feel like that is very true, and I feel confident in saying that, then I feel very much like I've made the right decision. I followed the process.
Yeah, I like that a lot. You do have to feel it is a weird way to, it's a weird thing to say, like, you have to feel good about it, because sometimes you don't feel good about it. But I mean it, the good in the way that you're saying it, good in the way that you've thought of all the different outcomes, you've thought of all the processes, you've thought of the impact that your decision makes, and then kind of stand with it.
I never want to get to a point where after I announce a decision or we start to go through it that people are saying to me, did you consider this? Did you consider that? I
Right.
want to be able to say yes, all the time as much as I possibly can. But I also think that's where pulling people in and not isolating yourself is so important too, right? I mean, no one does anything on their own. Everything should be a collaboration, and making sure you have the right folks around you to collaborate with that will be honest with you. That I think is the only way you get to that point.
And that can have different perspectives. And again, it goes back to what you were saying about building a coalition for success. And that's kind of the way that you need to go.
Absolutely.
This is great. I'm having a great time talking to you. How do you see the future of work continuing to evolve? I feel like we went into the decision making and we went into some hard conversations, but the last few years, everything has shifted.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you're seeing it at LFG, especially being in a place for so long. You've seen it go through multiple changes. How do you think what's next?
Yeah, so I think the last few years have been really hard for everyone. And I use myself as a barometer, and I look all around me, friends, family, coworkers. And, I think we've all been impacted personally and professionally, unlike, any other time, in our lives. Oftentimes, when something's maybe not going the way you want at home, work becomes your refuge, and vice versa. And I feel like with pandemic, our lives were just meshed together, the personal and the professional, in ways that just hadn't really been the reality before. And so I feel like it impacted our whole self. That's kind of what the terminology I've been using to describe at least how I felt. I always sort of had two personas. I had my home persona and my work persona, and it just allowed a little bit of balance. But now, we're on camera, right? People are working from home. You can't, you can't get away from the home life sort of coming into the work life, and vice versa. And I had the benefit, to have worked virtually for quite some time. And so my adjustment was different. But seeing, what's happened, I think there's a few things that I really kept my eyes and ears on. And Lincoln's great about research and tapping into not just how our clients are feeling, but like I said, also how the employees are feeling. And so there's been a lot of data. There's been a lot of perspectives that have been given to us. And I truly think that, people are starting to evaluate things like work-life balance, their work environment, and ultimately fulfillment a little bit differently. I think, at least when I came out of college, I felt like it was all about compensation, right? That's all anybody ever talked about. And that's changing. And I see it with my kids. I've got two Gen Zs that are in my family, and they have grown up differently. And so their expectations are very differently. And pandemic has uniquely shaped them. I can't say enough about what I've noticed. I had, my son was a senior when pandemic first landed. And so there were a lot of changes that, he went through by comparison to what I experienced when I graduated high school. He lost a lot, and his first year of college was very different. There was a lot more isolation. My daughter was a little better, but still very different. And so when they start to process what something is worth to them or how important it is to them, it's not necessarily in the same way that I was accustomed to. They really care a little bit more about how, they feel overall, right? It's not just about their compensation. And so I've been watching them and their friends really closely as they've gone through the last 2.5 years to see all of these differences evolve. And what I'm seeing play out with them is also what we're seeing reflected in, some of our our research, seeing how much the perspective has shifted among employees in their expectations of their employer, that their employer is helping them more with wellness, whether it be financial wellness or whether it's, personal wellness, that there's an expectation that they're in this together, right? And that, you really truly want to feel at home, at work, right? And in a different way than we used to. And they depend on their employer for that. So as I see it, I think that work from home is going to continue to some degree. I think there will always be some mix of that. I also think that, the employees, because of generational shifts, we're going to see some changes there. I think Gen Z entering this workforce over the last few years and continuing to is going to really put us in a position where we need to evolve some of how we think about benefits, how we think about engagement, how we think about promotion, and really pulling employees in differently than maybe I've been pulled in the last 20 years. I think their expectations will not be the same as mine. And what I'm looking forward to is seeing how this new generation shapes our work environment, similar to how the millennial generation shaped the work environment. I've seen a lot of changes over 20 years, going from a lot of more in-person focused engagement with our customers to then sort of a pairing of it with sort of that whole digital lens on everything, where we're really trying to offer experiences across every medium, whether it's in person or digital. And now with Gen Z, I think that those experiences now really need to shift into a way that feels like you truly are customer centric, that you care about your customer. And I think that's what we're seeing that them as a consumer group drive for us. And I think that's what they're going to drive as an employee base at all of the employers. I think we're going to see that entire generation really elevate our game, if you will, a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because the more, like, right now we're going to have this very, very wide breadth of generations within the workforce, and I think it's just going to get better because of that, because of the new expectations from people who are joining the workforce. I have great hope on Gen Z. I'm not going to lie.
No, and I love to hear you say that, because I do too, and I like change, and I know that that's not necessarily true for everyone. But I really feel like that's one of the hallmarks of that generation, is that they process change pretty quick, and they've always had a device in their hand. And we were laughing. I mentioned earlier about my husband and I trying to figure out what our path forward is. And we were laughing over dinner last week about, looking stuff up online, right? And how we used to have to go to a library for encyclopedias. I'm really dating myself now, but and how quickly our kids can find answers in just a second. And it sort of changes the college experience too, the way that they gather information. And so I really think that they are going to enable, I think, a faster pace of change than we've ever seen before. And that's really good for business too. I mean, I think that's the exciting part in my mind.
And talk about a generation that will be used to uncertainty. I mean, they've been marked by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jill, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat. Is there anything you want me to ask you that we haven't covered?
No, the one question is, what do you wish someone might ask you that they never do? So
let me ask you that.
I think it's, what would I do differently in my career?
Okay.
I'm really fortunate that, people look at my 20 years at Lincoln and they look at it positively, and it couldn't have been more positive. But I do always wonder when someone's going to ask me, well, would you do it differently if you could do it over?
So let me ask you that. Okay. We've talked about your career trajectory, and you certainly have one that's, I think, a little bit different than what we usually hear, but would you have done it any different?
I would, just a little bit. And I think the only real difference is I would take more time to enjoy the small successes and wins along the way. I think I do, at least. And I think a lot of folks around me tend to celebrate the big ones, you know, a new client, right? A new platform release, right? Whatever it might be. But I think sometimes it's the smaller stuff that adds up the most, you know, because it's what you see and everyone sort of sees in their day to day, whether it's we just met a, you know, communications deadline, or you got the chance to catch up with a peer that you haven't talked to in years. Or, you know, maybe it's even just how you helped a customer with something very small, but celebrating more of those little wins as you go instead of waiting for the big one. Because I think when you know, at least for me, right, 20 years, if I step back and I really start to think about all those small wins, I really feel, I think, a pretty typically renewed passion every time I give myself the opportunity to do that. And I didn't do it enough in the early parts of my career. I think I've really just shifted into that mindset since pandemic. And I would definitely tell all of your listeners, celebrate the small stuff every time it happens, because when you step back and you look at it through the broad view, you see just how much you've been able to accomplish. And giving yourself those moments of celebratory opportunity like that is fantastic for your self-motivation. And don't cheat yourself of that.
That's great advice, because I do think I agree with you. We tend to look at the big things or just the bad things.
Yeah, we do.
I'm very guilty of that as well. So I'm gonna take that advice too. Well, let's go into our lightning round if you're ready.
I am ready.
Okay, first question. If you could time travel, where's the first place you would go?
The beginning of time.
The beginning of time? That's a good one. I've never actually heard that one.
I want to see where it all started.
I like it. Would you rather explore outer space or the bottom of the ocean?
Bottom of the ocean.
Interesting. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, invisibility. I would love to be invisible.
I like that one.
I'm an observer. I'm an observer. So I would love to just not be seen and just watch it all unfold.
I like that one. What's the most used app on your phone?
Oh, by far, it's got to be iTunes. I'm a music lover.
Very good. What are you listening to lately? What's your big pump up song?
Actually, I've been listening to Taylor Swift's new album. I got to give her a shout out, right? She's from PA, and so I've been all the news about the tickets and all that. I've been listening to some Taylor Swift.
She's good. What's a skill you wish you had?
So, as I said, I really love music, but I don't play an instrument. I really wish I could play an instrument. And I think if I could pick one to start, it would be the guitar. So that's actually been on my list now that the kids are out and off to college. That may be where I'm headed next for my activity and filling my time.
I think that's a great use of time.
Yeah,
it's like lovely. Best piece of advice you've ever been given?
My dad always used to tell me, just work hard, push yourself, and don't worry about the rest of it. He always said, you're going to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and you want to be able to put your head on the pillow at night and just know that you did everything you could. And I really have tried to follow that, and it's worked wonders for me.
I love it. And finally, what's one thought you'd want to leave with our listeners?
So, I feel like I'm a very competitive person, but I've learned that, the biggest competition you have is yourself, from day to day. Mm-hmm. And so I really try to just focus on that. I'm just competing with the next best version of me. I know myself better than anybody else. I know whether or not I could have done more yesterday. I know whether I can do more today. And I really try to motivate myself through that. I mentioned this a little earlier. I think our internal dialogue can sometimes be, our worst enemy. But I think if you take that dialogue and you transform it into something that's positive and fair and constructive, it really can, move you forward. And so I always try to let folks know, just worry about competing with yourself. Don't worry about competing with anybody else. And I think that will carry you through almost anything.
I love that. That's great advice.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed our conversation. It's so nice to connect and connect through podcasts, or another asynchronous way of communicating thanks to pandemic. Yeah. But I think I love it. Thank you for taking the time with me today.
That was fun.
That was so fun. I love Lincoln Financial, and like you said, they have been with us forever, for definitely as long as I've worked with Ellevate. And they've just always been such a good partner, and always wanting to help make things better, and one of those companies that really puts their money where their mouth is.
Yep. And if you want to find a job in a company that puts their money where their mouth is, you should really come to our roundtable this week on Thursday at noon, because we're going to be talking about what recruiters really want to see on your resume and LinkedIn. So if you're kind of starting the year thinking, what's next? Do I want to change my job, or just want to, spruce up your public career persona? This will give you lots of tips. So Thursdays at 12 p.m., the Ellevate Roundtable.
Our entrepreneurs are also going to do a roundtable of their own. They're going to do a virtual networking elevated, so a lot of just really good networking. So if you are an entrepreneur and you want to just meet with other entrepreneurs, that is the place to go on Thursday at 4 p.m.
Yeah, and like we were saying at the beginning of this episode, if you're looking for a space to come and chat with people who are going through very similar things as you, or have a similar experience, join our community circles. We have 2 coming up in the next week. Our parents and caregivers are getting together this Wednesday at noon Eastern, and our 40 plus professionals are getting together next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, those are going to be really great. And then speaking of getting together, I wanted to just do a quick roundup of our in-person events, because as we've mentioned in the past, our chapters are hard at work getting back together in person. They still got their virtual offerings, but we wanted to give a little shout out to those chapters that have things coming up in the next week or so. So if you're in the New York area, the New York chapter has an executive council breakfast about executive leadership in the new workplace on Thursday at 8 a.m. Miami has a happy hour all about the power of the wardrobe on Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern time. Pittsburgh has another happy hour, sip and sort at Dress for Success. A lot of different Dress for Successes going on, which is really fun. At Thursday at 5:30. Our Twin Cities chapter has 2 different in-person events going on. They have a yoga nidra class on Thursday at 6:30, and a coffee and connection meetup Friday at 7:30 a.m. Seattle has another style one called Step Into Your Style with Confidence, an evening at Armoire next Tuesday at 4 p.m. And finally, Dubai, if you're all the way over in Dubai, they're an amazing chapter of ours, super engaged. They have a Rise and Shine monthly breakfast coming up next Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. local time.
Definitely check out our chapters. They're doing great stuff, and it's a fun place to meet some peeps. So they'll not only cheer you on your career, they'll remind you to have fun while you're taking names and doing the rest.
Yeah.
And so for celebrating our history makers this year, which Megan, you told me we got a few tags on social media for people making us check out some of the history makers this week. Do you want to start with that and give a shout out?
Yes, we do. And I was so excited. Minouche Shafik became the first woman president of Columbia University. So a special shout out and a special thanks to Lalina Luna, who sent us this one on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for letting us know.
And also, that's amazing. As a Columbia alum, I'm very happy for this.
Oh, yes. That was a big deal. Yes, we're very excited.
Katie Ledecky became the first woman swimmer to win 2 AP Female Athlete of the Year awards.
Tiffany Kraft became the first woman mayor of Whitesburg, Kentucky.
Rachel Jones became the first woman to record 1,000 laps in a year on Manitou Incline. Whoa. I'm tired just thinking about it.
Yeah, there's a picture of her. I think we're sharing it on our social media. but there's a picture of her like at the top of the incline, and you can see how far down it goes. It's crazy. I can see why she's the first woman to reach 1,000 laps, because I think that I would die at
That's
one.
amazing.
Yeah. Kelly Clarkson, familiar name, became the first woman to host NFL honors.
Michelle Karseski became the first woman clerk of Hartford County Circuit Court. Congrats!
Congrats, everybody!
Well, it's been a pleasure, Megan, even if my little toes hurt and it's late here in London, but it's been a pleasure catching up and hanging out with you today and with our amazing listeners.
Yes. Who do you have coming up next week for us?
So next week, you're going to be in for a treat. I really had so much fun on this one. I talked to Deepa Purushothaman, who just challenges and redefines the status quo of leadership, success, and power. She really focused on the experience of women of color. She spent 20 years as a helping women and clients grow as a senior partner at Deloitte. She went on her own, did a few things in Deloitte. She was also chairing the Women's Initiative. But what we talk about a lot is about her book, The First, The Few, The Only, How Women of Color Can Redefine Power in Corporate America. She did lots of research, and it is fantastic. I really, really encourage you to listen to this one. You're not going to want to miss it. I love Deepa. She was amazing.
Yeah, she was one of the little behind the scenes. She was the first of our New Year bookings. And I was just really excited when she came through that she was like, yeah, let's go ahead and get it scheduled to stay. And I was like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, it was great. So I had a lot of fun. You guys are going to have fun with this. And of course, we go into both her personal experience as a woman of color and my personal experience as a woman of color. And there's a lot, I think, in there for everyone. So yeah. Hope you can tune in next week.
See you then.
Bye. Join an exceptional peer group to sharpen your leadership skills and advance your career. Harvard Business School Executive Education now offers in-person and virtual programs. Learn more at hbs.me/go. That's hbs.me/go.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ellevate podcast. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe, give us 5 stars, and share your review. You can learn all about Ellevate membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. Thanks so much, and join us next week.
The Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift the Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.